Hey guys, welcome back to Ponderings from Palm Coast. I'm Mark Webb, and as promised, I'm reaching out and bringing to you all of the variety of candidates that we better all be voting, supporting in this election year midterms. It's very critical. Today, I have the great opportunity to sit down and talk to Steve Morgan. He's running for the 6th district as it is today. We don't know what it'll be like later. Steve, welcome.
Thank you very much.
To the podcast. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
We've scheduled this a couple of times and you've had some challenges, but you're over those now and I'll let you share. So basically, Steve, introduce yourself.
So my name is Steve Morgan. I am running for Congress for District 6, as Mark has mentioned. I'm running as a fiscally conservative Democrat, and I'm running because I was extremely frustrated with a few things. One of them is the divisiveness and the animosity that we're seeing in our politics today. And I think that there's a reason why a lot of people are angry at people on the opposite side, but I don't think that that energy takes us to a place that moves us forward. I don't know if any of you saw Ben Sass on 60 Minutes a couple of weekends ago.
It was unfortunately very powerful.
It was a really powerful piece.
But he's always been
a thoughtful guy.
A middle of the road.
Yeah.
Republican.
Yeah. But he talked about two things. It's like he's and for those of you who didn't see the piece, he's unfortunately succumbed to pancreatic cancer and he doesn't have much time left. And so the point of the piece was him reflecting on kind of what he's learned, of course, his lifetime. And it's a quick background. He was a Republican senator from Nebraska, was at one point considered, I think, a candidate for president. Was well respected, did not like Trump, got out of office as a result of Trump's first administration, became president of the University of Florida, where apparently he was well received, and then he's now in a situation where he's in the final stages of his life. But he said there are two things that as he reflects now that he thought were the most important. One of them is local connection. And that's what we're talking about here today, is that, I live here in Palm Coast. I mean, many of you who are going to be seeing this are in different parts of District 6, but that local connection, even on my street, we have a group several of my neighbors are volunteering on my campaign. Al Hadid lives down the street from me, the former county attorney, and his wife, Maureen, are interested in my campaign. And we've got neighbors that are out getting signatures and talking to people about my campaign. I think that local part is very important. I encourage you, if you don't know your neighbors, go meet them. It's not that hard. And then the second thing he talked about was the fact that there's nobody talking about 2030 or 2050. And that used to be a role that the Senate oftentimes took into its bandwidth, if you will. Looking at what are the long-term, and we don't have that right now. We don't have anyone. We don't have a presidential administration. We don't have a Senate. We don't have a House of Representatives. We don't have anyone that's looking at fusion energy and desalinization and how much water are we going to have and what are we going to be doing? What are we doing here? Part of my platform is balancing the budget and reducing the national deficit. What are we doing about that? We're doing absolutely nothing. We're actually spending more and more money. And so those are things that got me motivated to get into this campaign. The fact that we're not looking long-term, the fact that we're not connecting as well with the people around us as I think we could, and the fact that we're constantly lobbing grenades at the other side. For my campaign to be successful, because I'm running against a firmly entrenched incumbent, I'm going to need to have a big tent. And I welcome any of you who are listening to this. I'd love for you to join my campaign. I want independents. I want Republicans. I want Democrats. I want progressives. I want however people, as long as they're willing to listen to reason, if they believe what I'm saying makes sense, I would welcome any help that I could possibly receive.
So, all good, and what I love was the fact that Senator Sass was one of only 2 Republicans that voted to convict Donald Trump in his first impeachment.
Yeah.
So morals, beliefs are above and beyond the R or the D next to your name. And that was really what I was getting from what he was saying. And that's important today as well. Right here in Palm Coast, Flagler County, we have a bunch of races that are nonpartisan. Mm-hmm. Your water's bad, the traffic's bad. That's not a political thing. And yet we can't find a way to bridge that conversation so it becomes dysfunctional. And I think that's what you're talking about. But Steve, you've got a phenomenal background of how you got here. Can you share with us a little bit about the travels that you have experienced, your education background? It's just amazing. Can you touch on that a little?
I'll be happy to. Thank you. So I grew up in East Tennessee. I grew up in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, which for those of you who are not familiar is where the Manhattan Project began. So it's an unusual community in that there's a very high percentage. It's the highest percentage of PhDs of any city in the United States. And so I grew up around a lot of people who, like myself, had been moved there from somewhere else. So there were very few people that I grew up with that were originally from Oak Ridge. People came to Oak Ridge from Germany, from Israel, from Wisconsin, from, in my parents' case, North and South Carolina, all over the country. And I grew up with an interesting household. My father was a nuclear engineer and a nuclear physicist with his PhD in both. And my mom was an art teacher and an artist. And so right brain and left brain all over the place. And in many ways, I probably learned as much or more from my mom as I did from my dad. But, it was an interesting household to grow up in. And my brother and I were very fortunate to have kind and loving parents. So I went to Oak Ridge High School, very, very good public school. And then I went to Duke University undergraduate, where I majored in political science. From Duke, I went to the University of Tennessee Law School, which was my state law school, and I graduated there and also passed the Tennessee bar exam. I worked on the Al Gore campaign while I was there in the 1982 senatorial campaign. That was my first real brush with working on and getting actively involved in a campaign. And then I went to University of Tennessee Law School. While I was in law school, I also worked on the Gary Hart campaign in 1984. So when Gary Hart was running his first time around in 1984, I was the regional person for East Tennessee for the campaign. So I got a lot more exposure to politics at the retail level from that campaign. So
Duke University. Now, me being a Tar Heel, I'm from Raleigh. And I was born in Carborough and grew up in Chapel Hill. So I know you've got your Duke shirt on today.
It's also Democratic blue, too. It's a double entendre. It's
I
not
know,
a triple
but
entendre.
I can appreciate your travels so far. Still like you, Steve.
I have a lot of respect for the University of North Carolina. It's a very good, most people that aren't aware of what a good public university, the University of North Carolina is. I mean, Michigan, UVA, North Carolina, William and Mary, those are like some of the best public schools in the country. So kudos to you for going there. So after Duke, I went to Tennessee Law School. I worked on the Al Gore campaign, a senatorial campaign. I worked on the Gary Hart presidential campaign. On the Gary Hart campaign, I was in charge of all of East Tennessee for the campaign for a period of time. Subsequent to that, I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and I taught for a while. I taught law and other related subjects. And then I moved to Los Angeles, and I went to Anderson at UCLA, and I got my MBA there, concentrating on marketing and entrepreneurial studies. And then subsequent to that, along the way, I worked on the Bob Kerrey campaign in Michigan when I was living in Michigan, working for Ford Motor Company. And I also worked on the Barack Obama 2008 campaign in Napa, California, where I was living at the time. So a lot of campaign exposure interweaved with my educational experiences.
Well, that's important. A lot of people don't realize the inner workings of a campaign, the cost, the value, the efforts, the focus, or something the average voter has no idea of the mechanics behind that. I like to relate it to, for a long time I was heavily involved in a church group. And it was great to sit in the pew and you put your money as the plate goes by. But then I got pulled into the mechanics of it, and it blew me away about the structure and how that whole mechanism. So that's a huge value of understanding what you're getting yourself into.
It's a good value, but I can't use the excuse that I didn't know what I was getting myself into.
Exactly.
Because when I decided to run this campaign, having had that experience, to your point, I knew what I was getting into, and I knew that it was going to be overwhelming. I essentially have 2 full-time jobs right now. I'm still running my brewery, Alcatraz Brewing, which we haven't really talked about yet, and that's my first full-time job. But now I'm running, for Congress, and that is in and of itself, at least a full-time job. So I've got a lot on my plate right now.
You don't strike me as someone that shies away from being busy, Steve.
No, I stay busy,
and exposure through education.
Well,
learning from others, right?
I stay busy, and I don't have any qualms with working hard. My father grew up in Kershaw, South Carolina, a very poor part of the state. The soils were very poor. The only thing that grew there were pine trees and watermelons. And he was a very smart young man, and would have liked to have gone to college, but his family wasn't in a financial position to send him. And it was through his church, the Methodist Church, that they put a scholarship together. And he was able to go to Mars Hill Junior College. He did extremely well academically, and from there got a scholarship to go to NC State.
Nice.
Another school that is in
that
our
research triangle there, huh?
Exactly. And he went to NC State and then eventually got his master's degree. He was at NC State when they had a little nuclear accident. He was in the area where the reactor was, and so he had to stay under lockdown for 48 hours, but luckily didn't get exposed to anything. But from having a father like that, and then a mother that also had a very challenging upbringing, her mother passed away during her childbirth. I've always had the humility to recognize that these things are not usually given to all of us, whether it's education or whether it's the ability to live well. And so you have to work hard for it. So I work 6 days a week. I take Sundays off. That's my 1 day a week off. And I'm not shy about what I need to do to get out there and move this campaign forward.
So you did talk on, share a little bit about your business. Owning a business, being involved with a business is a huge asset, and understanding the nuances of the financial side of our government, which I know you're very passionate about. How did you get into brewing beer?
So I was, it's a good question, and it's an interesting story. So I was living in Napa, California, and I was working in the wine industry. I had started in the wine industry at Gallo Winery in Modesto, California as an executive, and I got hired to work at Beringer Blast Wine Estates, which is now known as Treasury Wine Estates. So Gallo is the largest winery in the world, and Beringer is the largest luxury or premium winery in the world because they have Chateau St. Jean and Greg Norman and all, Penfolds and all these other different brands all under one house. So I was hired to run a business called Napa Smith Winery, and it was a startup, but it was a well-funded startup. And along the way, the owner decided to also make craft beer. So we hired the most experienced craft brewer in America, a gentleman named Don Barkley, who started at New Albion Brewing Company back in 1976. And he started at the first new brewery in the United States since Prohibition. No new breweries opened between like 1919 and 1976 or 77.
Well, the big brewers had a lockdown.
They did.
It wasn't until the craft explosion,
Correct.
the microbrews and those things, like the product that you deal with, local branded products that have now, some of the latest numbers have shown they are taking the main lead of that industry. So.
Yeah, so it's true, but it's ironic because Napa is known for wine, and here we were in the middle of Napa Valley, and we were making beer. And then what happened was the Great Recession came along in 2008. And by the late fall or early winter of 2008, people wanted to have a $35 bottle of Chardonnay like they wanted a hole in their head. It was just not your top priority. And yet we were turning out really good, high quality 6-packs for about $8.99. And that's the kind of thing that after a long week and your financial situation is not looking particularly good, you can stop off and grab a 6-pack to take home for the weekend, right? So I ran that winery and brewery. We very quickly went from 80% wine sales and 20% beer sales to 80% beer sales and 20% wine sales. And so I went from being a wine guy to being a beer guy, and just as a matter of being in that place at that time. And so I came up with the idea several years ago. I do the swim every year from Alcatraz to San Francisco. It's called the Alcatraz Shark Fest swim. And
Shark Fest.
Yeah, well, it's so San Francisco Bay and the Tampa Bay are the two most shark-infested bays in the continental United States. Although they're mostly black-tip sharks, there are some great whites, but not a whole lot that come in the San Francisco Bay. But anyway, so I came up with the idea of Alcatraz as a brand name, and was surprised to see that it was actually available. Mm-hmm. And so I actually moved to Florida so that I could brew Alcatraz Brewing at Brew Hub in Lakeland, Florida. And so that's kind of like how I got here, was going from being a wine guy to being a beer guy, and then going from a beer guy to starting my own beer brand. And I've been very fortunate. It's a lot of hard work, but that brand is now statewide. It's in all the Total Wines in the state. It's at Universal Studios. It's at several properties on Disney, Miller's Ale Houses. So I'm not a big brand. I'm still a relatively small brand, but I've been fortunate to be able to build it out to a point where, and that has led me to traveling around the state a lot, which got me thinking a little bit more about my exposure to politics had been as a manager, not as a candidate. And so this is it's a different undertaking to be the candidate as opposed to someone who's helping to manage a campaign.
But at this point, you're probably wearing multiple hats, including...
I am my campaign manager.
You are.
And my treasurer.
Absolutely. And I'm excited to try your beer as soon as you come out with a non-alcoholic brand.
Yeah.
Which is growing. We actually have a spot in some coolers now.
Athletic Brewing is the fastest growing brewery the last 2 years, and they only make non-alcoholic beer. So it is definitely a growing category.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you're here in Florida. You're running a small business. You're sitting here doing your thing, and you wake up one morning and say, enough. What was that enough?
So, like many of us, I had been, for some time, very concerned about our president's mental health and acuity, and just the lack of judgment, the lack of any temperament, just really kind of like and just the hatred and the anger that really has been bothering me for a long time. And then when I started learning more about Randy Fine as the Republican incumbent who represents this district currently, and I think really part of the tipping point was the whole taking the dogs over the Muslims comment. And that was just like another thing that Randy Fine has said. We were actually talking before we went on air today about his comments about Armenians this week. And it's one thing after another. And I got to the point where I said, somebody has to do something about this. Somebody has to do something. And it took about 72 hours for me to figure out that maybe that person was me. I'm not sure. I think I came to the right conclusion, but it had to steep for a little while.
Well, you don't strike me as someone that is afraid to jump into an unknown area, a pot, if you will, to try to learn and do more. Yes, the individuals that we have that are sitting in office at a lot of places may not be serving the total community in one way or the other. I try to focus on understanding the problem, not the person, because the person isn't relative the problem exists and will exist long after Randy Fine leaves, you get elected, our budget, those passions that I know you have. It is true, the morality or the tolerance of a person's actions is way out of whack. I think back to in both of the campaigns you were involved with, Al Gore took the high road.
Mm-hmm.
He could have pushed it. He possibly would have won, but he said, I serve for the country. The country doesn't need this fight. I step back.
Yep.
And Gary was put in that same situation. And if we look back and we see what makes a great, in my mind, a great elected official is one that demonstrates, not says, but demonstrates that he is willing to sacrifice, put himself at risk for others in his constituent. And that's lost right now in a lot of ways. And so hopefully, and I know in the presentation that you're going to give us, that you're a problem solver guy. That seems to be your MO. That seems to be your challenge, and I think it's your love. Anybody that swims, how far is it from
1.5 miles? But I do.
But the current's
and I do it without a wetsuit too.
Exactly. So
You
you're
talked
not
about jumping into a challenge, jumping into cold water off of a boat, where you could just stay on and they could take you back to shore.
Oh no.
That's jumping into a challenge.
How many years in a row?
I was recognized this past year for having done it 21 consecutive years.
So we're talking
I'm
about he's done this race
Alcatraz
for 21 years.
Yeah, 21 years. And I've been very fortunate. Like I just coming off a fractured ankle, but I have never had in the last 21 years something like that happen shortly before the race that would preclude me from being able to do it.
So there's no doubt in my mind you have the gumption, you have the passion, tenacity
Thank you.
to work hard on these problems. What problems do we have that you need to fix?
Well, there's a lot of problems. I think one of the biggest ones for me is the balancing the budget situation. A lot of people don't want to talk about this because it's not a quick hitter. It's not an easy one, right? It's not a low-hanging fruit. But the fact of the matter is that our national debt is now $38 trillion. That translates to be $110,000 per living person in the United States, not just registered voters. It's $110,000 for all of us. Every single person who's watching, we all owe $110,000. That means that when you pay your federal taxes every year, the first $2,000 that you pay just satisfies the service that debt. That just satisfies the debt. Nothing, you don't get anything back for it. And that's with our bonds being purchased at a very low rate, around 1.8 to 2.2%. What happens when our own Congressional Budget Office says that our deficit is unsustainable? Not my word, their word, and that's a nonpartisan group, right? So now those bonds, we're going to have to start paying 3.5%, 4% to raise money for our debt. And when we do that, and then the total deficit goes up more, it's quite conceivable that within the next 5 or 6 years, we'll be paying $7,000 per person for nothing, just to service our debt. For the first time this year, our debt, not the first time, the second time in our country's history, our debt exceeded our GDP. So our debt is
They just
now
announced that like last week.
10 days ago or something.
Yeah.
It's 101%. The worst it ever was in 1946, where it was 106%. Well, what happened in 1946?
We had a war.
We just came off of World War II. And
So to clarify what he's saying is the gross product that the government earns income-wise
just the whole gross domestic product of the whole economy.
of everything,
Yeah.
our debt exceeds that annual income.
Correct.
So no business can survive that.
No. No.
No family can survive.
And we're not talking about it. And we have to talk about it. We have to do something about it. That's why I describe myself as a fiscally conservative Democrat. I am probably right in line with many of the Democrats on social issues, and I'm completely I mean, I just saw, I think it was yesterday, it's a huge number. 50,000 people have lost SNAP benefits in Florida already. So that's food stamps. 50,000 people. And then people go, well, the food stamps, these are people who just sit around and, collect money from the government and don't do anything. 58% of them are children or seniors. And if you throw in people with disabilities, you're now more than 2/3. There's also been research that shows that people who receive those benefits are more likely to go out and get a full-time job afterwards than the people who don't receive those benefits. So this myth that people just sit around and collect, food stamps and, Medicare and Medicaid and don't do anything with it, it's completely that. It's a myth. And so I think that that is one of the challenges that we have to address. We have to address where we are on the budget. We also have to address affordability issues. We have a president who acts like this is a new word. Affordability. He's like, I've never heard of it before. Affordability,
Well, I think is that really a surprise to anybody?
He's never
He
experienced
was
it.
born
Yep.
into billions.
Yep.
He will die into billions.
Yep.
He has not. Who said? His AG just said the other day, don't you have to show your driver's license to get into a grocery store? He actually said that. He's under the impression that we have to show our ID to get into a grocery store. Now, he might have misspoke, but the disconnect, I do not believe for a moment that someone that has a wealth that his cabinet has any appreciation or understanding of the burdens, the suffering, and the expectation of 95% of the people in this country.
I completely agree with you.
So that's why the people don't understand the debt ratio, because that's the last thing they're worrying about. And I saw some recent numbers because I knew we were going to be speaking, and it's interesting that for the average person looking at bankruptcy, the numbers have tripled, and yet the efforts to find a way out, which are done by a lot of private organizations that you can go out and hire to help you get out, are dropping. Mm-hmm. Because people are just taking the easy way out of the debt, handing it over. Isn't that kind of what our government's doing?
Well, I just want to go back to something you were just talking about we were talking about affordability.
Yeah.
So if you look at the total expenditures we've done on this war so far, this wrong war in the wrong place at the wrong time, we could have paid for 2 more years of healthcare subsidies. For all of, I was one of those people that when my business was relatively new, I was getting a healthcare subsidy through the Obamacare plan.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people have been able to benefit from that, and it really makes a big difference. That money is all gone now. 15 million Americans are going to lose health care over the course of the next year or two. People are losing their benefits already, and we've already spent as much money on this war as we would have been able to extend those healthcare subsidies by 2 additional years. And by the way, on affordability, that is the number one thing that is driving a lot of people into personal bankruptcy and other situations, is a lack of healthcare subsidies. There's a lot of things that we have to do, but so just go back to your question about my overall portfolio, and then we can dive down into more things. So balance of the budget, affordability, and then the third tier is respect. And I just feel like that there's too much, there's a lot of vitriol, there's a lot of anger. A lot of that anger is well placed. I don't believe that anger is a negative emotion all the time. Sometimes you have to learn from anger. Anger helps you to figure out what's going on, what you need to do to move forward. But we really need to just try to get to a place where we can bring people together and try to, in that situation, try to figure out what it is that we all collectively need to go do. And I don't believe that Randy Fine, as the office holder in this office right now, is doing that. I have not seen anything from him that indicates any desire of inclusiveness or working together.
Well, he serves a group of people like-minded, that he sits in a seat, he provides a vote to support the general direction of the existing, I hate to, I work real hard not to lump in Republican, Democrat, because it's so much broader than that.
Yep.
You're coming from a place in which, in most cases, would be you're more libertarian, more middle of the road person, as it should be, as I describe myself as well. But there's also far right, far left that feel like they're speaking for enough of a group of people that gets them elected. Now, you and I know he got elected because there was an R next to his name. And in Florida and in the 6th district at the time, loyalty is huge. And I find that falls very strong, and I'm very supportive of your talking about with respect, because I look at other examples of times where our government was struggling. Doing the right thing is hard. Mm-hmm. Ask the Republicans that went to Richard Nixon and said, "You're on the wrong side of this and you need to leave." His own party.
Goldwater.
There are great examples in the past of people standing up for going, this isn't right. There are a few here now. They're coming out, they're speaking. I can feel the rock starting to roll a little bit from pushes like you. So I very much, to me, the respect portion, I think that's the starting conversation. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And whether you are reaching out to your Republican neighbor or you've got family that are Trumpers, find a point of respect. Find a point of common agreement. You will be amazed at how that conversation will bloom. And that's why I really like what you're pushing in your scenario.
And I want to say something about that. Thank you very much. You don't go to Duke University and law school and get an MBA without having a bunch of Republican friends.
Absolutely.
It just does not happen.
Well, I would say conservative friends. We all know, and we've heard over and over again, the definition of Republican and Democrat is so fluid right now. Yeah. It's not even a fair label anymore.
I had a teacher in high school, Gene Pickle, great man. He said we shouldn't be talking about liberal, conservative. We shouldn't be talking about Democrat, Republican. We should be talking about progressive and reactionary. Are you about moving forward? Or are you about pulling back? That's really what this is all about. And then over time, those percentages, as they impact the parties or the liberals or the Democrats, change over time, right? But the question is, are you looking to move forward or are you looking to move back? And I think that today, most of the people in the Republican Party are looking to move back. They want to preserve a society that was predominantly white, was predominantly male-dominated, and they don't want challenges. They don't want to look forward. They don't want to figure out what we have to do for our long-term energy plans. What do we have to do to have enough fresh water? They'd rather not do that. And I want to say something, because you'd mentioned Randy a little bit ago, and I had mentioned him as well. And I want to, can we maybe, I don't know if you can zoom in on that or whatever, but this is
he'll take a picture of it.
Okay. So this is District 6, which is where we are. So we're right here in Palm Coast right now. And that little S on this map says that I live just a few miles from here, okay? And this is District 6, and this is the new map. This is the redistrict, which turns out to be the same map, but it's the new one. That's where Randy Fine lives, and that's where Jennifer Jenkins lives. They both live more than 80 miles south of the border of the district. And I just felt like putting it on a map really brings it home, because they're further outside the district than the district is wide. Just think about that for a minute. So why are they running in District 6? They live in District 8. District 7 goes directly in between the two, as does District 10, District 11, District 9. So they purposely, even Ron DeSantis called Randy Fine a carpetbagger. Oh, the fact of the matter is,
so happy to get him out of the Florida politics.
Yeah, so I just think that there's a few things going on here, but part of it is it's a lack of respect for those of us in this district to think that we have to have a Democrat and a Republican who are front runners for this race that don't even live here. They don't pay taxes here. They don't live here. And I'm starting this week, so I'm announcing it here for the first time. I'm going to start walking around this district. And I'm not going to walk from one end to the other. Lamar Alexander did that famously in my home state of Tennessee in 1978. But I'm going to go to different municipalities, and I'm going to get out, and I'm going to park my car, and I'm going to go walk into all of the businesses and introduce myself, ask for the owner and manager. I'm going to talk to the employees, and I'm going to listen to them. I'm going to listen to what they have going on, and it's something that I believe in. It shows the fact that I live in the district and I care about the district. And I'll ask people if they've seen Randy Fine. I'll bet the answer is going to be no. I'll bet they have not seen Randy Fine in any of these places that I go to.
So, you've got a great map. I have two examples. Don't look at anything like that. The fluidity of the district. Why do you think that they're so aggressively doing the redistricting? And how is it affecting you?
So, okay, let me take the second part first. It looks like it didn't change anything. Based on what we have and based on what the legislature voted on, it looks like District 6 remains exactly the way it was before. So there's not that big of an impact directly on my campaign. But the bigger picture question that you ask is, why are we seeing this movement, which started with the Republicans and then the Democrats have rightly responded to it in many states? And what people are trying to do is to take away the ability for people that have historically been disenfranchised to be able to elect candidates that represent those constituencies. And what we're seeing here in Florida and what we're going to start seeing now in Louisiana and Tennessee, a lot of other states, is they're drawing district lines. It's an oversimplification, but if you take a district that you win by 15 points, and if you recarve it so that you'd only win it by 5, but you might be able to pick up 2 more districts that you could win by 5 and pick up a couple of extra seats. The problem with that math is I think it's going to backfire on that. I think it's going to backfire. The races lately have been more like 15, 16 points flip from where the races were 2 or 4 years ago. And so if you take a bunch of areas, if the Republicans take a bunch of areas where they had a relatively safe margin and they cut that margin down lower so that they can spread it across more districts, what's likely to happen, I would be surprised if they end up with more than 18 out of the 28. I really think it's going to go the other way for them. They're not going to go from 21 to 24. They may go down to 18 or 17 or 16.
Right. And my opinion is, but history, and I was listening to Ezra Klein recently that was talking about the historical record of this type of effort over the last 50 years has been successful in low turnouts and fail miserably when you get 60% or more voters, because the expectation of the redistricting is based on objective analysis of previous elections. No one knows what District 6 is going to look like in November. They're trying to predict what a map looks like based on previous. That fails miserably when the turnout, which is what heavily expecting, which is supporting what you're talking about. If we can get to 80%, and we've come close to that, it doesn't matter what the redistricting is because those numbers aren't applied. And there's a lot of pushback right now by Republicans in some of these states saying, you're going to hurt us more than you're going to help us.
That's right.
And you're doing it why? To appease? This goes back to the respect conversation, right?
They're doing it for a jury of one, an audience of one.
Why?
Yeah.
So obviously it's more of, for me personally, and why I'm very involved and why I do this podcast and a lot of other things, is because our government will not survive a 50% participation long term. It wasn't designed to be that way. The vote of the people, when historically you look and you running the presidential campaigns, I guarantee you the number of people were sitting there going, well, if the turnout is down around 47% and we get a quarter of that, we'll win. And if you look, and it's easy to do, and see the presidential elections moving backwards, none of them were ever from a majority of eligible voters. So not registered voters, because that's a misnomer. If you're 18 to alive, which comes out to about 200 million people, we never come anywhere close to even 50% of that. So that's a challenge both parties suffer with. Right now, the Republicans are trying very hard because they know they can't win a popular vote to
increase barriers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To put, and part of it is this conversation we see all over the news, and we get people so numb. So that goes back to one of the questions I like to ask the candidates. As you get seriously started with your petitions, because I know that you've had a lot on your plate, what have you learned so far knocking on those doors?
I mean, so I think one of the big things about getting people to come out to vote is you have to give them a message that inspires them to go to get involved. And so that's one of the things that I'm trying to do with my message. To your point, maybe respect should come first instead of the third of the tier, but it makes the word bar. So it doesn't spell out as well. If it's rab, if you flip it around, it doesn't quite mean the same thing. But we have to give people a message and a reason and the energy and enthusiasm to come out to vote. There's a number of other things that we could do. We could declare a national holiday for elections. And a lot of countries do this, and they tend to have much higher voter participation rates when they do. I would be in favor of that. We need to, if you think back, when I think back to my political, knowledge, starting back in the late 70s, most people voted on election day. And that is not true anymore. If you look at the numbers for our area, it's roughly a third mail, a third early, and a third day of election. Those numbers move around a little bit, and they certainly move around more if, you were kind of insinuating, and I think you're correct. I think we're going to see a much higher turnout this year than we've ever seen in a midterm before. And if we do, those numbers are going to increase dramatically on the day of voters and also on the early voters. I think we'll see a lot of movement there. So I think that it's important for us to continue to do everything we can to prevent any curtailing of early voting, any curtailing of mail voting. Those things need to be as strong as we can possibly make them. And I also think that we should seriously consider having a national holiday for elections. It's been done in many different countries. The problem is that a lot of people, and a lot of the ones that are in charge right now, don't want more people to vote. And so therefore, it's going to be really hard to get something like that passed constitutionally.
Yeah, I have zero expectation that truly the changes that in 2016, as a large group realized the first term, that the transition was going to take many more years than we believe. And I've always been a big believer in, and maybe you know this from your business model, you don't know what you don't know until you know it. The Trump administration is teaching us, teaching our government, teaching our citizens where our weaknesses are that need to be fixed. I was just reading or listening to NPR on the way over here, and they were talking about 3 times the House Democrats voted to only allow redistricting within a year time of the census. So it could only be done every 10 years. What a concept, right? We're all sitting here going, why don't we have that law? it didn't pass.
Yep.
It didn't even get brought to the Senate to value or the steps we can take to improve our voting. I love to use this, and you're welcome to borrow it. 98% of the citizens in this country pay their taxes how?
They file, but
Online.
Yep.
98% pay your taxes online.
Unless you run a small business like I do, where I'm
Yeah,
not allowed to file them online.
But you could go to your CAP.
I still have to mail it in.
I know.
It's going to change next year.
It is going to change next year.
Yeah.
The point I'm trying to make is voting is not a legal mandated requirement.
Yep.
Taxes are.
Mm-hmm.
You fail to pay your taxes, you might get a knock on the door. Not this year, not next year, but they're going to come knocking on your door. And we do it online every year. And the large majority of citizens do their taxes online. How is that this dysfunctional that we burden what I think is way more important to the health and the goals of our government, and we make it so difficult? What?
I don't know the answer to that. You bring up a really good point, because I think part of the answer, and it's not the right answer, is that people still believe that, I know people who believe the 2020 election was stolen because the voter systems were all rigged. But the problem is those voter systems were all offline. That's
Right.
the requirement. There couldn't have been something that was transmitted to all of them. They're all offline. And so there's so many conspiracy theories, that this was a staged event last week in Washington, D.C. There's a lot of crazy stuff out there. And so maybe the fear people have about voting online is that somehow it'll all be corrupted by Elon Musk or something like that. But I agree with you. It should be something that we should be able to do. I mean, to think about in this day and age, that you still get your mail-in ballot, and then you go, you do your research, you look at what the League of Women Voters say about the candidates, you look at what the Observer says about the candidates, you read what you can about the candidates, you mark your ballot up, and then you wait to mail it in case something happens that gets closer to the day of the election, but you can't wait too long because it might not get there in time. It's crazy. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, no, I think that's where our elected officials should be working to benefit the needs of the government for survival. And you point out our debt. It's unsustainable. We spend more money on our debt services and get nothing for it. Great comments. I mean, I read something recently, blew my mind. During the first year of the Trump administration under DOGE, they fired or terminated or let go over 250,000 federal employees, and it was estimated over a 10-year period they may have saved $25 billion in that whole effort. We passed that number in the Iran conflict on the 11th day.
Yeah.
So think about that.
Yep.
We fired all these people. We made all this budget hoopla to save all this money. And 11 days into a war, conflict, whatever you want to call it, we blew all the money in 11 days that would have taken us 10 years to recoup. I believe with Steve and others that are right-minded thinking, and I praise you for throwing your hat in the ring and getting involved. But the people that support you have the ultimate responsibility.
Yes.
The people that can't put gas in their car, can't get health care, need to get, they need to get angry. And you, I think, have touched on some great things that I'm a big believer in finding one or two serious conditions. I'm a big believer in healthcare. I spent 20 years in the military. I had socialized healthcare. My wife saw 5 different doctors before our son was born. It was great health care. We didn't have a doctor. We never worried about going to the doctor to get an earache or whatever, which today families struggle with that so much. They send their kids to school sick, which then spreads illnesses and viruses and stuff. Having a message like you're doing here, not an attack of a person or an administration. And I believe that the Democrats and the people need to put their thoughts on 1 or 2 single messages, which, by the way, Republicans are really good. They just tend to pick things that piss people off. Immigration.
Yeah.
Immigration's terrible. Yeah. So let's all vote to get rid of immigration, in which we need immigration.
Michael Moore's done a couple of movies about this. It's motivation by fear.
Yeah.
It's just motivation by fear. But I want to address 2 things you just brought up because I think they were very good points. So first of all, when I fractured my ankle a few weeks ago, so it was in the evening, early evening, and I debated what I was going to do. And I knew it was at least badly sprained, if not broken in some form. But I didn't call for an ambulance and I didn't go to the emergency room because I don't know, even though I have good healthcare advantage plan, I didn't know how much of that was going to be covered and how much of that was going to be my out-of-pocket. So I waited to the next day and went to the doctor's office, got the referral, then got the x-ray, then back to the doctor's office to get the referral, and then off to the orthopedist. I did that whole process because I literally did not know how many thousands of dollars it might cost me if I had the ambulance trip and the emergency room and the whole deal, right? So I think that that's something that is a major problem for this country that we have to address. And the other thing, to your point about your military service and having the type of medical system that you have, here's another one of these little zingers that I've loved finding when I go online and research these things. 1973 was the year that we privatized medicine in the United States. Before then, we had essentially socialized medicine. In 1973, we were number 1 in the world for infant mortality. We were number 1 in the world for longevity. There's like 4 different measures. We were number 1 in the world in every one of those measures. Today, 18, 28, 31, 17. This is the same country. And we have the best doctors in the world. We have the best medical facilities in the world. And yet we don't provide that care. Over 30% of the dollars spent on healthcare go to the insurance companies to manage a system that we could manage for probably 3% of the total dollars spent if we had Medicare for all. So we're spending the money in the wrong place and we're ending up with the wrong outcome as a result.
Well, and I think also because of decisions made by the Supreme Court and others over time, that the allowance for funding of elected officials to support the lobbyists, and one of the biggest lobbyists is big pharma and medical, they're not going to sit back and tolerate the efforts to socialize medicine and simplify that, even though, hands down, when polled, 80% of the country wants socialized medicine.
Right.
And that's where it comes full circle back to your conversation about debt and budget. If we have a set amount that's coming in, most of us, whether it's small business or even running your home, knows how much is coming in and how much is going out, and anything left over is, we can go out to dinner tonight, or, well, let's go see a movie.
Yep.
It's very simple, yet it's not well taught at grade school level. But we don't know how to do that within our government to understand that expenditure issues. So we're challenged by when, let's say, the Democratic Party gets behind and says, all right, our number 1 goal is, if elected, we're going to bring single payer, we're going to follow the guidelines of socialized medicine, we're going to fix it. What a challenge and battle that's going to be. But would that make people get out and vote? That's the fear.
I think that if it's communicated to people what's going to be the impact on their lives directly, and if they understand that they'll have better medical care as a result of that undertaking. The problem is communication. The challenge is communication, not the problem. The challenge is communication. We have to communicate that message better. We have to communicate what the impacts are going to be of making those kinds of decisions. But right now we're in a situation where we're spending money on a system that isn't working. And we don't, and I was also going to comment on
it's working for some.
It's working, that's true. It's working very well for some people.
Yeah.
But the challenge with a lot of voters is they'll vote their values as opposed to voting their self-interest. And it's a fascinating undertaking, because otherwise, why would a lot of people vote for Donald Trump for president when his economic policies would not benefit their situation in life? And they do that because they are more motivated by the fear and the anti-immigrant and all those messages than they are what their own economic self-interest would be. And that's another area of education that we have to get better at, explaining to people what the outcomes are of the decisions that we make.
Well, and it takes hard work and commitment to understand those differences.
Yep.
And fear drives, passion, and in the case of the past administrations, following the guidelines of cost of living, economics, immigration. Immigration has been around for hundreds of years.
250 exactly.
Yeah. In fact, I think we all are immigrants at one level.
That's right. The great
But
majority.
I used to get exposed during my business levels, and I was a senior manager with the Boeing company, and I was involved, and I was always watching out for and surprised when there were fire starters and firefighters, and a lot of times it's the same person. Mm-hmm. And I used to aggressively try to call them out and go, there's no problem here. You make a problem, you justify the problem, then you fix the problem, and you want to be a hero. Our immigration conversation over the last 10 years is exactly that, I think. And so the debt is a real deal. But why do people not pay attention? Because they're not knocking on the door asking for, all right, well, where's your 100K to pay off your debt?
If you take the average person that's watching this right now and think about each one of you owes $110,000. Now, imagine the conversation that you would have over a table in your home with your spouse or significant other or your family, that if you owed $110,000, you wouldn't keep using that credit card. You'd cut that credit card up, and then it wouldn't be good enough to just make the minimum payment, because you'd end up paying $379,000 over the course of the next 15 years.
Yeah.
You would cut the credit card up, and you'd start paying the money down faster than the minimum payment pattern so that you don't pay interest on it. Well, that's really where we are on our budget situation. If you really think about it, just get together, whether it's households or it's communities or it's your federal government. We need to get together and say, this is a real problem that we have to address. We have to do something about it now. It's going to involve some hard choices. Going back to the debt, it's now larger than our military spending. Now think about all of those aircraft carriers and all those intercontinental ballistic missiles and all of those bases in Germany and in Okinawa. I've been very fortunate to travel a lot around the world, and I've seen a lot of that presence that we have in different places. I've been to, Pearl Harbor. You see, what we have there. Imagine that the money, you don't even have to imagine, it's true. The money that we owe is a bigger stack as of April of this year. It's now a bigger stack than the amount of money that we spend on our military. That's just mind-boggling. The amount of money we spend just paying off our debt every year.
Right. Well, Steve, We could go on forever. I love your passion.
Thank you.
And I love the reasons behind what you're trying to do. Any final thoughts? Anything you want to let people know? How can we help you? How can we become visible in moving you forward in this election cycle?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you. First of all, it's a learning experience. The first time I've sat down for a kind of a long form interview like this. I also have to give you a compliment. As I am out and about and meeting people who are involved in the Democratic Party, and I ask them, who knows everything that's going on? And it's always you. so obviously your reputation precedes you, and it's well deserved. As far as for myself, we've done, I think we've hit on a lot of the most important platforms. I do want to tell people that you can go to www.morganforcongress.us. You can donate, you can volunteer, you can sign my petition. So all of those things are out there and available. There is a presence also on Facebook and Instagram. That's also listed on the website as well. So I would really encourage you, if you're interested, to get involved in this campaign or to donate or to learn more, to go to www.morganforcongress.us.
Well, that's great. Well, Steve, thanks for coming. It won't be the last time. It's only May, and the primary's in August.
Yep.
And that'll be a critical time.
Yep.
So thanks so much for coming. Guys, listen to what these candidates are telling you. Listen to what they're sharing. You are ultimately why all of us are doing this. You are the person that puts pen to paper, that makes a decision, that puts someone in a position that represents you. Take it seriously. Be involved. Be educated. Take the time. And as I like to say, if you're not registered for mail-in ballots, do it today. Not because it's the best way to do it, but it gives you a reminder a month out that there's an election. It's laying on your coffee table. It gives you an opportunity to open it up, look at all the various choices that you are going to have in this upcoming election. Numerous. They're fighting to keep it just on one page, front and back. And the failure of you not voting is the failure of this government and its Constitution. Everything within our Constitution was built around you, we the people. So don't step back from this. And this isn't political. I don't care who you vote for, but I want you to vote. I want the numbers and the turnouts to be almost 100%, because I know you care. When you fill up your gas, you care. When you have a medical condition and you can't get your meds because it's, do I pull out of my 401k to pay for my medicine that the doctor says I need it? Those aren't things that we want to be asking ourselves. Pay attention, stay safe. Remember, like and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time. Talk to you later.
Thank you very much.
Excellent.
Enjoy.